Coming up next, a tale of one of the most misjudged, underrated, and overlooked tracks that evolved into an all-time rock classic. So this song was sent to a Hall of Fame rocker by a legendary group of session musicians searching for the perfect performer to bring it to life, even though this guy wrote his own songs all the time. But the legend, he decided to record it. But he says he rewrote all the verses and only kept the chorus. But he refused a writing credit because he thought it would be just a deep cut. He never thought it would be a hit or even be released as a single. Problem is, the song became a hit after his band played it to standing ovations in concert, and the song skyrocketed in popularity thereafter due to an iconic movie scene. And this legend didn't receive any royalties for it. In fact, he likely lost millions upon millions of dollars. Next, we take those old records off the shelf and reminisce. Coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember the Freedom Rock commercial back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. I know you'll find something you like on here. You know, there is a skill and a strategy behind picking songs to release as singles from an album consisting of multiple tracks. It's kind of a lost art now, right? But you remember it. The conventional wisdom was always to release an up-tempo banger first, and then save a slower track or a ballad for later, power ballads sometimes, maybe for the second or third single. The time of year is also taken into account for what the single should be. I mean, the record industry has long believed that a ballad will perform a lot better during the winter, maybe even during a holiday season, since people are not as active and perhaps more sentimental. That's the thinking. It's also critically important that the first or second single is a hit, or you may not get to a third or fourth single because the album is not selling well enough, and the media will take that as a sign that the public doesn't like the album. So they'll cut their losses at that point instead of feeding what could be a stiff. Sometimes even the specialists get it wrong, though, and they're surprised by the success of a track that they thought wouldn't work. One of the model examples of strategic planning with a surprising outcome that perplexed the experts is definitely what happened with the marketing of Stranger in Town, the 10th studio album by Mr. Bob Seger and his second LP recorded with the Silver Bullet Band.
The trick you said was never play the game too long.
There was a track on that record that everyone, even Bob himself, didn't believe in. Yet it ultimately became one of the most popular jams of the rock era. A little nostalgic ditty called Old Time Rock and Roll. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band were gearing up to collaborate on Stranger in Town, their second album together. On a hunch, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, who often backed Bob in his studio recordings, sent Seger a demo of Old Time Rock and Roll. It was written by the trio of George Jackson, Thomas E. Jones, and Chuck Crozier. Now, the original demo, it featured George Jackson on vocals, which really didn't work. That's what David Hood, the Muscle Shoals rhythm section bass player, thought. Because after they finished the recording of the demo, they listened to the track and they thought it was pretty good, but George's voice, it didn't have that rock and roll grit that they imagined for this song. They wanted it to be really powerful. So to address this, Hood and Muscle Shoals guitarist Jimmy Johnson, who were also producing a rock group at this time, brought in that group's singer Dennis Gully. When we heard his version, Hood thought it sounded something like Bob Seger would do. So they sent that tape to the studio where Bob and the Silver Bullet Band were recording.
She take those old records off the shelf and sit and listen.
The Muscle Shoals guys, they'd worked with Bob Seger long enough to know that he rarely wanted to cut other people's songs. He was a songwriter, grand songwriter, one of the best. Still, they decided to take a chance. Maybe Bob would like it and make an exception. And their hunch was correct. Bob liked it, but he wanted to make a few changes to make it more conducive to his distinctive style. From here, several accounts of what happened next have developed. There's David Hood and the Muscle Shoals rhythm section story, and then there's Bob Seger's story. I'll tell both. The way David Hood tells it, Bob re-recorded a version of Old Time Rock and Roll with the Muscle Shoals players and with the Silver Bullet Band, But the version with the Silver Bullet Boys just didn't click. David claims that in the end, Bob put his voice on the original demo recorded with George Jackson at Studio B without changing anything. They simply just removed George's vocals and added Bob's, and that became the hit version of the song that we all know today.
Same song. I like that old time rock and roll.
Here's Bob Seger's account of how it went down. Bob admitted that he really liked the song, but he says he changed everything but the chorus. In an interview, Bob said the only thing he kept from the original was old-time rock and roll. That kind of music just soothes the soul. I reminisce about the days of old with that old-time rock and roll.
I reminisce about the days of old with that.
Now, the curious thing is that Bob is uncredited as a writer for the song. Now, Bob said the reason he is uncredited is because he thought the song would never be more than just an album cut, a deep cut. So he declined any writing credit. Bob's manager, Punch Andrews, advised his client to ask for a third of the writing credit since he'd written so much of it, but Bob refused. He called that decision the dumbest thing I ever did. It ended up costing him many millions of dollars. There's no doubt about that.
You never even get me out on the floor.
Let me explain. Despite Bob's claim about writing all the verses, David Hood insists that Old Time Rock and Roll is an undeniable George Jackson song, and he has the tapes to prove it. Now, regardless of Seger's assertions that he made alterations, George Jackson, who passed away in 2013, was a renowned American songwriter and a singer, and he was known for his contributions to blues, rhythm and blues, rock, and soul music. Although best known for co-writing Old Time Rock and Roll, George also penned numerous other hit songs for various artists, including Down Home Blues, The Only Way Is Up, and the Osmonds' first hit, One Bad Apple. That was a big hit.
One bad apple don't spoil the whole bunch, girl.
The recording of Old Time Rock and Roll is quite spontaneous and very unorthodox, adding to the song's nostalgic authenticity. Authenticity, that was imperative to Bob Seger. So the idea of recording music with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section was an essential part of the mix. Their artistry lent a sense of integrity to Old Time Rock and Roll. Night Moves, that was such a mega commercial success that Bob didn't want his core fans to think that he was selling out to pop radio by any chance. The section was a highly respected group of studio musicians who had worked with the best artists in the music business. There's Aretha Franklin, Rod Stewart, Paul Simon, and Wilson Pickett, among many others. The catchy repeated piano intro played by Muscle Shoals session keyboardist Barry Beckett, that was actually a goof. The piano riff was not meant to be repeated, but the equipment used during the mixing accidentally played it twice. Bob Seger and his producer liked the unexpected result. They thought it was really cool, so they just kept it in. The rest is history. The lead guitar licks on Old Time Rock and Roll, they were not played by a member of the Muscle Shoals rhythm section. Instead, the job went to Forrest Howard McDonald, a young guitarist that was just passing through the studio that very day. David Hood recalled that Howard arrived in the parking lot with his parents in their car, and Muscle Shoals studio founder Jimmy Johnson was hanging out on the back porch. Howie told Jimmy he wanted to learn how to play on recording sessions, thought he was a good player. Jimmy asked if he had his guitar with him, and when he said yes, Jimmy invited him right in. His parents never left the car. They just sat in the parking lot with the engine running, so that they could keep the air conditioning on. He may have been green, but Howie's playing definitely solid enough to stay on the final version of Old Time Rock and Roll. Howie shared how he ended up on the record. He was living in Hollywood, but visiting his father in Alabama. They decided to check out the famous Muscle Shoals studio. At that time, Howie hadn't been on any major recordings at all, but he was a professional musician who had played on the Sunset Strip. He even shared the stage with Van Halen at one point. Though Howie was initially not credited for his contribution on Old Time Rock and Roll, he was paid for his work. He finally did get his due when he received credit on the Greatest Hits LP and the Ultimate Hits Rock and Roll Never Forgets compilation. Howie McDonald went on to have a successful music career, releasing numerous blues albums, winning awards, and performing extensively at shows and festivals, mostly in the American Southeast. The bluesy tenor sax for old-time rock and roll, arguably one of the most famous sax solos in rock history, that inspired solo was performed by none other than Thomas Neal Cartmel, known by his stage name, Alto Reed. A pivotal, long-standing member of the Silver Bullet Band for sure, the very same man who played the chilling sax line for Turn the Page. Alto put his heart and soul into that solo with passionate phrasing, groove, and attitude into what was a relatively simple part to play from a purely technical perspective. Alto's sax solo transformed old-time rock and roll from a track criticizing the disposability of modern music into a celebration of what makes real rock and roll such a timeless, non-stop party. There was an 8-year gap between Bob Seger's first hit, Ramblin' Gamble Man, in 1968, and his second hit, Night Moves, in 1976. During that period, no musician worked harder on the circuit than Bob Seger. After achieving the sweet success of a number 4 single, he was determined to prove that it was no fluke. He accomplished this by building on the strengths of Night Moves. For his album Stranger in Town, the follow-up to Night Moves, Seger divided the recording sessions between 2 backing groups, his touring band, the Silver Bullet Band, and the Muscle Shoals Session Aces. The album featured both arena-ready rockers and reflective ballads showcasing Seger's real versatility. By this time, he was in his mid-30s, and with a wealth of experience, Bob had he'd become a master storyteller. Stranger in Town was loaded with intriguing tells and catchy lyrical lines, so the plan was to pretty much stick to that formula. It was decided that the lead single would be still the same. It actually climbed to number 4, equaling the peak position on the Billboard Hot 100 of Night Moves.
Still damn good. No one's gotten to you yet.
Then it was the thrilling rocker Hollywood Nights. That one went to number 12, followed by the gorgeously tender ballad We've Got Tonight. Everybody in the Seger camp knew that song was going to be an absolute smash. But, it was such a departure for Seger, they certainly couldn't lead with that song.
We've got tonight. Who needs tomorrow?
Album Rock Radio gravitated to Feel Like a Number, another quintessential Seger and Silver Bullet track.
Feel like a number. Feel like a number.
Stranger in Town had been in record stores now for a solid year. It was looking like old-time rock and roll, was going to end up exactly as Bob had predicted. And oh, by the way, deep album cut. Still wasn't on the docket to be a single by any chance. The psyche completely changed when Bob and the Silver Bullet Band added the song to their live set, and the audience flipped out. They roared. They roared with their approval. It was huge, went over huge live. The Silver Bullet Band originally didn't care for the song, partly because Bob had dismissed it as not being what he called silver bullet-y enough. When Seger first suggested adding old-time rock and roll to their live set, the band was unfamiliar with the tune and they gave him a hard time about it. Seger recalls, the band, they were always complaining about this song. Now, during preparations for a show in Germany, he insisted, let's just play that song for the heck of it and see what happens. Despite the song not being available in Germany, the audience responded with thunderous enthusiasm. Now, this overwhelming reaction made the Silver Bullet Band realize that they had underestimated the potential of the Misjudged track. Because of the amazing crowd response during their live shows, old-time rock and roll, it just took on a life of its own. It soon became obvious that it should be released as a single. So in March of '79, old-time rock and roll was taken off the shelf, so to speak, and busted out as the 4th single from Stranger in Town. The single rose to number 28 on the Billboard Hot 100. It went to number 31 in Canada, and it went to number 38 in New Zealand. In due course, album rock radio owned it. The energy of the track made it a format staple, and it's never left rock radio since its release in 1979, that's for sure. The consistent play at classic rock radio and its heavy exposure in pop culture have made old-time rock and roll really a lionized American rocker. Like many of the songs we featured in episodes of Professor of Rock, this song has far eclipsed its peak chart position and become larger than the record label experts would have predicted, or have predicted. That's why Bob Seger was so bummed out with his decision to not seek a writing credit on the song. Old-time rock and roll exploded with a new generation of popularity when it was featured in the 1983 coming-of-age comedy Risky Business. Not only did the scene vault old-time rock and roll into iconic pop culture status, it marked the breakout performance of one of the all-time biggest box office movie draws ever. Yet just as the track was initially tossed aside, the future megastar of the screen, he was initially disregarded as well.
Just take those old records off the shelf.
While filming The Outsiders in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tom Cruise received a call to audition for Risky Business. They were looking at a lot of young actors. Originally, screenwriter-director Paul Brickman had seen the film Taps, and based on Tom's portrayal of an unhinged military school student in that movie, he didn't think that Tom was exactly right to play the role of Joel Goodson in the film that he was writing and directing. In an interview piece, Tom shared, and I quote, "Somehow my agent, without me knowing, arranged for me to just drop by the office to say hello to Brickman. So I went in wearing a jean jacket. My tooth was chipped. My hair was greasy. I was pumped up and I was talking in an Oklahoma accent. Hey, how y'all doing?" Paul just sat there and stared at me. Tom returned to Tulsa but flew back to LA for another audition. I walk in and I see this stunningly gorgeous woman sitting there looking at me, and I'm thinking, oh, wow. This is what Tom Cruise said. Rebecca De Mornay had already been cast, and they wanted to see the two of us together. I tested. To make a long story short, we didn't test that well. Eventually, something about Tom had a profound effect on Paul, and he believed in this young actor. In what became the movie's most memorable moment, Tom Cruise uses a candlestick holder as a mic, and he dances around the house in his underwear to old-time rock and roll. Paul Brickman chose the song because he was just looking for a rock and roll piece that wouldn't be dated, right? The scene was filmed at a schoolhouse, actually, in Skokie, Illinois. In another report, Tom Cruise explained to journalist Cameron Crowe how the scene unfolded with the actor's improvisation. I took the candlestick and I said, how about making this the audience? And then I started ad-libbing, using it as a guitar, jumping on the table. I waxed half the floor and left the other half dirty so I could slide in on my socks. As we went along, I added more things like flipping the collar up and jumping on the bed. Originally, it was just one line in the script. Joel dances in underwear through the house. We shot it in half day. End of quote. Tom concluded, and with that dash of spontaneity, to Bob Seger's classic, Tom Cruise danced his way into movie superstardom, and the song became a part of 80s lore, and it still is. Soon after the splash of Risky Business, there was a lot more pop culture to come for old-time rock and roll. In 1985, the Chipmunks covered the song, which was featured in the Hardee's commercial advertising Alvin and the Chipmunks drinking glasses. Then the following year, the song appeared in the TV series Alf in a parody of the famous Tom Cruise scene, where Alf, left home alone, trashes his house.
Just take those old records off the shelf.
Activision's Guitar Hero World Tour television commercials directed by Brett Ratner also paid homage to the scene. It features celebrities like Kobe Bryant, Tony Hawk, Alex Rodriguez, and Michael Phelps lip-syncing the song while using the new instrument controllers. The track has also been featured in episodes of The Nanny, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Northern Exposure, South Park, Scrubs, and The Flash. In Stranger Things Season 1, Steve Harrington briefly sings it. It was an SNL hosted by Ron Reagan Jr., the cold open featuring Reagan home alone at the White House, where he dances in his underwear to old-time rock and roll. It's all over the place. I remember Scrubs, I mentioned that one. They also paid homage to the iconic scene where three characters recreated the dance. And then in 92, the Ben Stiller show featured Stiller doing a spot-on impersonation of Tom Cruise, turning his life into a musical titled Tom Cruise Dressed Casual, complete with a snippet of the famous underwear scene. Actually, at the 2000 MTV Movie Awards, Stiller parodied Cruise again, this time as Cruise's stunt double. Cruise appeared in the skit as himself, allowing Stiller to reenact the tighty-whitey dance once again.
Okay. Now let's roll on this.
The reason I'm talking about all these, especially the advertisements, is Bob, because he didn't receive a writing credit, he didn't receive any royalties from the licensing of the song, nor could he stop it from being commercialized like it was in the TV ad for Hardee's or Friskies cat food, the use of which Bob said he wouldn't have approved, if he had the power to stop it, but he didn't. Bob has made it clear that he always liked old-time rock and roll, or he wouldn't have recorded it in the first place. He loved the scene with Tom Cruise in Risky Business. Who wouldn't, if you're a musician? It's become one of his favorite songs to perform in concert. Leave us a comment about old-time rock and roll and Bob Seger. Did you love how they use it in Risky Business? What are your memories of this classic hit? What do you think about Bob Seger not getting a songwriting credit for it? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We would love to have you as part of this community celebrating rock and roll, good old time rock and roll every day. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.